What's up guys, my name is Bruno Rodriguez and this is Flicking a Flash with today's review over probably the hardest movie I've ever had to talk about, The Two Popes. Just so you know, I've been sitting here thinking about what I'm going to say for about 20 minutes. And I say that this is going to be difficult to talk about because not only am I a Catholic and have a vested interest in this type of movie and want to talk about all the themes that it's trying to present, as well as talk about how accurate it might have been portrayed, but I also want to make sure to be able to judge it just as a film itself, you know? So I figure I'm just going to talk about all the technical, great aspects of the movie, and then I'll move on to the other harder stuff to discuss. So the first thing I want to point out, the first thing that stood out to me is the cinematography, but even more the editing. Editing in a movie is rarely ever meant to stand out. If it stands out, it usually means people did something wrong. You want it to be seamless and just go along with the movie. And I'm always kind of still looking for it, so I pick a lot of it up, and sure, it might distract me a little bit from the movie, but I find that if it brings me out of it because it's really good, then it still works for me. And it happened several times throughout this movie where it was plain that there was just some great editing going on. And I haven't really talked a lot about Oscars and who I think should be nominated, but this is probably one that I would count on maybe having a nomination for editing. Also, on the topic of cinematography, not only were the shots beautiful and really well composed, but there was also, for example, the use of shaky cam when they needed to add tension or signify that there's great uncertainty going on. They also had a few instances of sudden zoom-ins to a face just as the character's about to say something really important or really unsettling. So that kind of intentional filmmaking that built on the dialogue, I just love seeing stuff like that, and this movie handled it perfectly. Like the shots felt like they were made with purpose. Many examples actually popped to mind. A few of them I'll mention is one, they were in the helicopter and the camera's in the helicopter with them, and suddenly it starts moving away and suddenly it's outside of the helicopter passing through a window and it's seamless. You never know when it happened. It's just astounding to see effort like that. Another one, when Pope Francis enters a room, it's dark and it seems small, and then it kind of extends back and it keeps going, and suddenly there's more light, and suddenly he's in the Sistine Chapel and it's huge and light and colorful, and it's just in one take that whole thing happens. And just the technicality behind doing something like that is so impressive. The movie also had great uses of flashbacks, a few near the first act of the movie and another instance of longer flashbacks near the second half of the movie. The first one was just greatly used to show Pope Benedict's life before he became a priest, how he was almost going to be married but felt God's call to the priesthood. And during the flashback there was a line that I absolutely love and it stuck out to me. It was a priest asking Pope Francis before he became a pope or a priest if he actually knew what he was leaving behind, and the priest said something about how he was going to need to learn to love in a different way because he will still need love in his life. He will still need to give it and he will still need to receive it. It's not like suddenly when someone becomes a priest they suddenly don't need love or are shutting that away from their life. They still need to give it, but they need to learn how to. And that's such a deep line, not only at face value but also the depth that it carries. Okay, let's move on to something just as amazing, the acting. Jesus Christ, Jonathan Pryce and Anthony Hopkins killed it in this movie.
Mistaken, you are.
Silence! I cannot play this role anymore.
I literally, for the movie, was thinking, did they actually get Pope Francis to film this movie? Like, Jonathan Pryce just completely embodied that super sweet and joyful soul of Pope Francis. And Anthony Hopkins gave also a really troubled performance that really went along with his character. Now, the characters, Pope Francis and Pope Benedict. I just want to preface, I don't know as much about Pope Benedict as I do about Pope Francis, just because I was a bit younger when Pope Benedict was the active Pope, and it wasn't until later when I was older and really knew what was going on that Pope Francis became Pope. So I know more about him. Also, I went to a Jesuit high school and he was a Jesuit priest, so I definitely have a bigger connection with Pope Francis. Now here's where it kind of becomes really difficult to talk about. I don't know how much liberty the movie took as far as creativity goes compared to the real life events and how the real life people are. So for the sake of the video, I'm going to talk about the characters as they were portrayed in the movie, not as how they are in real life. Although I suspect that it's pretty similar and accurate, I'm going to talk about them as they are portrayed in the movie to avoid misjudging them. Now I want to start off by talking about the differences in the popes and how the movie handled it that I really love, because the movie spends a lot of time putting these two very different people who have opposite viewpoints on a lot of things and seeing how their viewpoints are seen by the other.
The way you live is a criticism. Your shoes are a criticism.
You don't like my shoes?
And while the movie tends to lean more towards the side of Pope Francis and his viewpoint near the second half, they kind of give you his backstory and you get to see that he's flawed too. He's a human like everyone else.
The church needs to change and you could be that change.
It could never be me.
And it kind of evens out the playing field, because at the beginning, Pope Benedict was shown as a strict, stationary old pope that was not willing to change. And he was very steadfast in what he thought was the right direction for the church to take, which in turn was leading a lot of people away from the church. And Pope Francis' whole thing was that the church should be willing to move with the people so as to not lose them. And they have that going back and forth. Should the church move with the people or should they be stationary? Is God stationary? Is he not changing, or does he also change with the people? There's a cool line that's also in the trailers that says,
Nothing is static in nature, not even God.
Where should we find him if he's always moving?
On the journey?
Oh, perhaps we'll find God over there, on the journey. I'll introduce you to him.
And that pretty much sums it all up. That's their two opposing viewpoints, and this movie is just them figuring it out and working with each other. And just controversies aside, it was really enjoyable to see how these two people learned to see from the other's perspective and became really good friends. I love that part of the movie, and I think that's the strongest part of it. It also had a great theme of responsibility. Even more than the last movie I reviewed on the king and his responsibility towards his nation, this movie is more about the responsibility over the Pope, which, I mean, is even bigger than any political leader.
It's not me who needs to be satisfied. It's 1.2 billion believers.
So that theme about the weight on the back of the Pope and the image that he has to uphold is very prevalent throughout this movie, and I loved how they tackled it. Now, I guess there's no such thing as spoilers because this is kind of based on real life, so it already happened. It's not like I'm spoiling anything. Because when I say that Pope Benedict steps down and retires, that really shouldn't come as a surprise. But the impact that had, I never realized how big it was. Now, granted, I was younger and I didn't really care, but it was such an insane move on Pope Benedict's part, but he really believed that that was the right choice for reasons laid out in the movie that I don't really want to mention just so that you guys can see them. But yeah, guys, overall, I really like this film, and throughout it, I really wasn't sure if I should even do a review, because these are the kind of things that are maybe too political to talk about, but at the end of the day, whether you're religious or not, this is a movie, and a great movie at that. Because of that, I'm going to give this movie a 4 out of 5 stars. Guys, I really recommend you check it out. Like I said, regardless of whether you're religious or not, this is a great movie, and you're going to love it. If you are a Christian, then I definitely recommend you check it out, especially if you're a Catholic. This movie, more than making you take sides, it's more about making you think. I love that it really didn't tell you how to feel, or who to think was right. It just laid it out for you to choose and for you to decide and for you to think, and I absolutely love that. So yeah, go check it out. It's on Netflix, really easy. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing and checking out my latest videos, and as always, drop a like and drop in later.